Hi ladies, it's Monique with Boundaries for Women, and for this video, Boundaries for Christian Women. I hope you're all doing good, and thanks for being here. And for this video, I just wanted to talk about the difference or the challenges of figuring out the difference between pleasing God and pleasing people. And I think as Christians, this can be a really tricky one. It can seem tricky because it can feel like they're the same thing. Especially, let's say, in church settings or situations where you're dealing with, well, really anybody. The bottom line is this. When you're doing something that you know you're supposed to be doing, how do you feel? And when you're doing something that you're not really sure is like what God wants you to be doing, but you're doing it anyway, and you're feeling a lot of maybe resentment, or you're feeling frustrated or worn out or burned out or downright angry, or you're just feeling like just something doesn't feel right. Generally, when we're doing something that is God-pleasing, we feel joy. We feel alive. We feel full of life. Like life is just like vibrating out of us and shining out of us, and we're happy. And then there's other situations where we're doing them because maybe we feel like we're supposed to, or we feel obligated, or we feel guilty. We feel like, or like we're a bad person if we don't do that thing. I think that's one of the main ones, especially for Christians. Like you're not being enough like Jesus if you don't do this thing, or if you don't tolerate this thing, or you don't, go along with something that somebody expects you to do. And those things that people sometimes expect, they can be good things. They're not, trying to get you to rob a bank necessarily. They're just, they want you to do something. But the question is, are you getting in touch with yourself? And are you getting in touch with God to see, like, what does God want? Because a lot of times, I don't know, it depends. Sometimes you can be raised in the church and it's just like that line was never there. You could never even see where that blurry line was, because it was just always assumed that you had to be doing, and serving, and, putting up with everything and just tolerating. But God's actually given us the ability to have self-respect. And Jesus said, love yourself as you love others. He didn't say, don't love yourself. He didn't say, ignore yourself and love others. He said, love others as you love yourself. So if we're not loving ourselves, we're not honoring ourselves, we're not taking care of ourselves, and we're always doing what we think everybody else wants us to do, how is that really doing what Jesus said, And so just to hone in for a minute on what people pleasing really is. Let's just think about it. So people pleasing is basically doing things, saying things, agreeing to things, smiling when we don't really think something's funny, laughing maybe when we don't think it's funny, doing things that basically are not aligned with who we are. It's like we're out of integrity. And you know it because you know when you're people pleasing. You may not even have had a word for it up until, that term came around, but it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good. And you always go away questioning yourself and doubting yourself and being like, do I really want to do that? And there's a lot of like internal dialogue going on about it, right? And when you're God pleasing, when you're doing something and like this is like you're just in flow with God. You're just doing what he wants. You're not having to overthink it. I think that's one of the main things with people pleasing, is it involves a lot of like thinking about it. Like, oh, that person wants me to, stay late and talk to them. And do I really want to be doing that? Or do I not want to be doing that? And interestingly, it seems to often be with people who we're not even that close to. People who don't even really know fully who we are, and somehow we're very worried about them thinking we're not a nice person. And ultimately, the only person's opinion that matters about you is God. His opinion is the only opinion that matters. That doesn't mean that you're just mean to people on purpose and you just don't care what they think. Who cares if they, but the bottom line is, if you're here, you're probably not purposely being mean to people. And you're probably being so nice to people that sometimes you're not being nice to yourself. So maybe ask yourself, if I was in this situation and this was flipped around and it was the other way around, would I do this to someone else? Would I expect someone else to do this? Would I expect someone else to tolerate this? Or would I, just insert yourself in the other person. I think as Christians, we're so used to inserting ourselves into people's shoes to be empathetic, which is a beautiful thing. And this is how we should be, but not to the point where we're never part of the equation, where we're never part of the empathy. Like, we're only giving empathy to others, but we're not really having it for ourselves. We're not like having compassion towards ourselves. So ask yourself, if you're in a situation, right, and you're not purposely trying to hurt somebody's feelings, you're really trying to be kind, but it's a situation where you're like, feels taxing, ask yourself, because you're probably used to asking yourself if you're being kind enough to other people, right? So maybe start asking yourself, is this compassionate to me? Am I being compassionate to myself right now? Because, believe it or not, Jesus actually cares about you just as much as you, and tons more than you care about other people, right? And so he's maybe wanting to know if you're giving yourself the same compassion and love that you're giving to other people. And if you're not, then start doing that. Start doing it in little ways, like, don't answer the phone every time it rings. Unless it's a life or death situation, which 95% of the time it's not. And don't always have to say yes to everything, and say yes to you. Tune into yourself. And again, this is so hard for Christians because it's like, yeah, but isn't that selfish? Isn't it selfish for me to think about myself? Well, Jesus didn't seem to feel selfish, going off on a hill by himself sometimes. That was just what he did in order to refill, in order to connect to God, in order for him to be able to do all the amazing, miraculous things he did, and this is Jesus, the Son of God. He did that. So if he took care of himself and he honored himself because he knew who he was, then we also need to follow him in that, and ultimately that does come down to knowing who we are to God, knowing who we are to Christ, and knowing who we are in him. And when our identity is rooted and grounded in him, then it's less important what everybody else thinks about what we're doing and what they're judging. Especially most people have very half-baked versions of who you are. So let them have their opinions, and you do what you need to do for you. And basically just tuning in to God and his love for you and his care for you is what's going to do that. God's care for you. And the more you realize how much he cares for you, and the more you dip into his, waters, the less you're like, want to go swimming around and in some like place where you just feel like you're paddling and paddling and paddling, and you can never please everybody enough. But you don't have to, because that's not your job. And if anybody's trying to make you feel that it is their job to always be pleasing them, then that needs to be examined. That's another video. But anyways, just wanted to address this and let you know that, just maybe this frees you up a bit, and I hope it does. And but if you have any questions, as always, send me a note, put it in the comments, or just you can also talk to each other on here. You can help each other. So anyways, but thanks for listening, and I do hope this blesses you, and I'm here for you, ladies, and I love you. Okay, bye.